Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast, live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and later on our podcast channel. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and joined by our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. We record this episode in the hours after Newcastle's 0-0 draw with Arsenal. A fantastic result, Aaron, down at the Emirates against the country's best side. Now, I said Spurs was the biggest win under Eddie Howe. I actually think this result, despite it not being a victory, trumps it. I think this was the performance and the result that says to anyone that was still doubting it that Newcastle mean business and they are here to stay, especially in this race for the top four. I think we saw a team that was organised and disciplined, but also carried a threat. Under previous managers, they would go down there, they would sit back and they would absorb it. And if Newcastle could get a point, it would be a bonus. That would kind of be the team talk. And there was an element of absorbing it in many ways last night at the Emirates. But you also knew that if they got the chance on the threat, on the counter, they would be a threat. And you always felt that they could hurt Arsenal. And I felt something that was even more refreshing than all of that was Eddie Howe's comments after the game. He spoke about how happy he was about the disciplined nature and the defence and what have you, but also that he was disappointed that they didn't carry more threat. Again, previous managers going down to the Emirates, especially in Arsenal that are in good form, taking a point, taking a clean sheet, they'd be hanging their hat on that. That would be, the result of the season for Steve Bruce, maybe Rafa Benitez. But Eddie Howe, he's not having that. He's not having that. He sees the positives, but he wants more, striving, he wants more. I mean, just how refreshing is it to hear those comments after that game, after such a good performance as well, to say, actually, you know what, we're not done. I want more from this side.
Yeah, look, it typifies, what Eddie Howe's all about. He's never satisfied if Newcastle don't win. And even though, as you say, he was going to the best team in the league, the most informed team in the league ahead of Newcastle, there was still that element of disappointment that they couldn't snatch it towards the end. I think it's a huge statement. Yes, they didn't go and win, but everybody thought, how are they going to react? It's the biggest test they've had in a long time after, quite a handsome run of fixtures. And they've measured Arsenal, pound for pound, step for step. And is it a bigger result than Spurs? I'm not sure. But it, as we've just been saying before we came on air, if anyone was in doubt as to whether Newcastle United can mix it with the best this season, they've been given an answer, because that's Tottenham away, Arsenal away, Manchester United away, no defeats, and obviously losing to Liverpool away in the 98th minute. It just shows that Newcastle United can go toe-to-toe with anyone in this division.
I mean, Arsenal had been scoring goals for fun. They'd been winning games for fun. And Newcastle just frustrated them. They had a game plan. They stuck to it. They'd clearly been well organised, which is even more of an achievement given the quick turnaround in games, because playing Leeds is a totally different set up to playing Arsenal, isn't it? So fair play to Eddie Howe and the coaching staff and the players for buying into the plan, and it worked. You saw that by the way Mikel Arteta was frustrated on the touchline, by the way Arsenal towards the end of the game was showing a little bit of desperation. Newcastle went down there, they played well, didn't get the win that they set out for, because make no mistake, Eddie Howe wanted 3 points, and he didn't, he wouldn't. That's not me just saying it and easy to say. You know Eddie Howe wants to win every game and he's genuine in that aim. So he didn't get that, but they performed so well. And as we both said there, any doubters about Newcastle's longevity in this race for the top four, this is a massive marker set down.
Look, everybody knew they were going to go there and they weren't going to sit back. It's not the style of play that Howe wants them. We know whether they're playing Arsenal away or Bournemouth at home, they're going to press teams and they're going to try and hurry them into mistakes. I thought the first 10, 15 minutes, it looked a bit nervy. As we spoke to Tom Canton from Football London yesterday, who said Arsenal really like to start games quickly. Those first 10 minutes, if it can grab a goal, that's what Arteta's all about. They weathered that storm well, I thought. Yes, it looked a bit, nervy at times, but they did all right. And then they grew into the game. Yes, they didn't have too many chances in attack, but, they started getting the better of Arsenal at the back. And I think there's a growing pattern now. You saw it at Liverpool, you saw it at home at Chelsea, and you've seen it last night. Newcastle are getting accused of time wasting, and look at it, yes, maybe they're starting to slow games down, but their game management now against the big teams is absolutely second to none. I mean, to get Arteta that flustered last night, if Arsenal want to go win the league, then himself and his players have got to respond better to that. I mean, I don't even think Newcastle United were, making that obvious. Yes, as I say, they were trying to slow the game down, but Arteta just absolutely lost his rag. And this is what Eddie Howe's teams are doing to Klopp and Arteta and Graham Potter and big players who have got plenty of experience now.
And there's a bigger picture element to it. It's not just what Newcastle are doing in those 90 minutes. These teams, maybe Klopp a bit more than Arteta, but these teams that are getting frustrated, these so-called top 6 teams, they know that Newcastle, if everything goes to plan, they're here to stay in the top 6, and really, someone's or 3 or 4 of them are going to have to miss out, because Newcastle are now real contenders for the top 4, real contenders for the title in some people's eyes. I know they're 9 points off, but that's why the likes of Klopp and Arteta get so frustrated. Arteta a little bit more because he obviously realises he needs to keep winning before they face Man City and what have you. But Newcastle are really starting to rattle the established sides, and it is, from a Newcastle point of view, it's great to see opposition managers getting so flustered and so frustrated. Jason Arthur there, says to go to the Emirates and come away with a 0-0 draw is an amazing result for the Toon. Amazing defensive performance. And we've also got James Hilliam in the comments as well, saying to be the first team to cost Arsenal points at the Emirates is excellent to show adaptability on our game plans this season is a real progress. And I totally agree with James there. Eddie Howe, is adapting tactics, is adapting game plan to the opposition they face, and it is great to see. And what I enjoyed last night was there was an early warning sign, wasn't there, from Saka when he did Dan Burn, and then there was another from Odegaard shortly after. And Dan Burn in those moments looked very, very vulnerable. But Newcastle woke up, they realised, and then started to double up on the likes of Saka just to help Dan Burn out, who after that had a very good game.
Yeah, I think, it did look nervy the first 10, 15 minutes. We said yesterday on the podcast that we thought that might be the matchup that caught Newcastle United out. We know that, Dan Burn, he really struggled with Anthony at Old Trafford, didn't he? And we thought it would be the same with Saka. One thing I will say, I saw some calls before the game on social media, it's time to bring Maxi back. That decision to play Joelinton left wing was an absolute masterstroke. And
I said it, I called it. I said he was going to have a brilliant game.
Yeah, he did. And what it is, I thought he started slow, but once he started doubling up and him and Willock started, tripling up sometimes on Saka, I thought he was absolutely fantastic. He ran into the ground, all 3 midfielders did. Thought Fabian Schär did as well. Just a really spirited, gutty performance. And, we've been so used to seeing Newcastle putting 3 or 4 or 5 goals past the lesser teams this season. But when they need to really knuckle down, backs against the wall, really graft to get a point, we're seeing them doing it against the biggest sides. And I think, yes, Howe might be disappointed with how it went last night and, not taking all 3 points, but I don't think you can have any real disappointment going there and playing like that in that manner and coming away with a draw.
And we'll hear from Eddie Howe and Mikel Arteta later in the show. But just on Newcastle's performance as a whole, you said they are very spirited. You mentioned Joe Linton, who had a cracking game. How much of it is down to believing that they belong in that top 4?
I think, it's something that we say on this podcast all the time, the spirit and the confidence running through that dressing room. What Eddie Howe has instilled in that team, the fact that he's said to them, you can go to any division, any stadium in this league, home or away, and beat the best teams. And I think the players know that. There was times yesterday where you thought Newcastle might be able to nick it, but yes, they were under the cosh towards the end, but you never felt like inevitable that they were going to concede. That back 4, that back 5, I've never seen a more confident, defensive back line for Newcastle United. And it all stems from Eddie Howe telling the players, it doesn't matter if it's Arsenal away or City at home, we can get something here and actually be disappointed not to get even more.
Well, it's interesting because on BBC 5 Live earlier in the week, I think it was Nigel Reo-Coker was talking about how players, no matter what age you are, how experienced you are, they just love to be coached. They want to be told what position to be in, what the game plan is, what they need to do individually to help the team. And he pinpointed Eddie Howe's work at Newcastle as an example of where that's happening and where the club, the players, the team is reaping the awards.
Yeah, look, it's something that, it hasn't happened overnight. And even though they had a fantastic 2022, you feel like now, even after that fantastic end of the season, we're really seeing the best of Eddie Howe. And I mean, look, it's been well documented the amount of players he's turned around, and the Joelinton, the Almirons, the Crafts, the Longstaffs, Willocks, how many players he's inherited. And it goes back to something we say a lot, and it's about even Lascelles, Fraser, Carrius, players that aren't even playing on the pitch. They're being coached, they've got the arm on the shoulder, and that feeling subsequently in the group is just one of absolute positivity. And look, this run has got to end somehow, somewhere. But I just don't see.
Does it not end with a Premier League title?
I just think I've never known a manager come in, especially taking over a club 19th in the league, and not have a single blip. Look, yes, the first couple of months weren't easy, but ever since that Leeds game away last Jan, it's just been plain sailing, and you just think you can't see where it's going to end.
No, and fingers crossed it does. And what we will do now is hear from Eddie Howe in his press conference after the game last night at the Emirates.
I think our resilience, into that second half, it was a long half for us, and I think probably in a year ago we would have found a way to concede there, and I think it just got a newfound resilience to the team, and I think a lot of that's not just physical but mental as well. We managed to withstand pressure late in the game. The players' fitness levels is very, very high, and just the collective energy is very good at the moment. So I think all those things combined meant we didn't concede.
That is one thing I would love to do. Right? I would love to be able to spend a day up at Newcastle United training ground and go through the fitness regime that they are clearly put through, because they are so fit. I was thinking last night about they just never look tired, and yet they put in so many yards across the pitch. You don't let the opposition have a moment's rest. You know, when they've not got the ball, they're working so hard. When they've got the ball, they're travelling distances at pace. I would just love to know the ins and outs of that fitness schedule that all those players are being put through on a daily basis.
I mean, I saw Arsenal fans complaining last night on social media of how many Newcastle players went down with cramp and other ailments. That's actually no wonder, given how far they run, the sprints they're doing, the recovery work off the ball is just absolutely fantastic. And I mean, it just beggars belief that this was the side he inherited from Steve Bruce. You had Wilson, Lascelles, Shelvey, in all not so subtle ways coming out and saying that the fitness wasn't perfect. In the space of a year, he's turned them into absolute machines. And I mean, the only thing you've got to worry about is as the season gets on, they're still in 2 cup competitions. They're going to potentially be in a top 4 race. It's going to be very, very physically demanding. You look at that bench last night, there's not too many options to come off it that could change a game. You even look at Chef Wed this Saturday, and if he wants to rest the full midfield, which he probably won't do given he wants to take the cup seriously, do you have 3 more midfielders that come in that team? I don't think you do. So I think there's one thing maybe that they run the risk of burnout later in the season, but certainly for now, the graft they're putting in is absolutely exceptional.
Roger Cook saying, what a 0-0, definitely not a board draw. And Craig saying, great result considering the fixtures the others have coming up against each other. People are just very, very happy at the result, at the performance. And I just keep thinking about how well they did, just chasing Arsenal down. An Arsenal side who are deservedly top of the league, who I think might feel a bit hard done by when everyone is fully expecting, or most people are fully expecting Man City to chase them down and win the title in the end. There was times last night when I was just sat in amazement at how quickly they passed the ball and how quickly they moved. It didn't happen too often, which is applauded to Newcastle and Eddie Howe. But the times that Arsenal just had control of the game, they look a really good side. And the fact that we're sitting here saying that didn't happen too many times shows you just how well Newcastle United did last night.
I mean, you only have to go back a couple of days to the Brighton game away to see how easy they can pick teams apart. I mean, as Arteta's ingrained this sort of football and DNA into his players, where they're sort of playing similar to how City used to play under Guardiola, and I'm sure Arteta's taken a lot of that, but their quick passing, their triangles. And as you say, there was never really a moment where you thought, okay, Newcastle are getting absolutely outplayed and ran off the park here, especially after the sort of 15 minutes once it's settled into the game. So make no bones about it, I think alongside Newcastle, Arsenal have been the best form side this league. They've been tearing teams apart. Obviously they haven't dropped any points at home before last night. It's a remarkable result and a remarkable performance, and you just want this run to just keep going forever.
What kind of springboard does it give Newcastle to hold and deservedly hold the top side to a 0-0 draw?
It gives them an absolute massive platform. You look at the next sort of 5 or 6 games in the Premier League and in the Cup, they're all winnable. You've got to fancy them to go and keep this run going at Sheff Wed. They're going to have a massive crowd behind them for Leicester. Fulham, West Ham and Palace, you'd fancy, I'm hoping I'm not putting the jinx on it here, but you'd fancy at least maybe 2 wins out of that. It's a huge platform. They've played, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the top 6 sides away from home already. Yes, they've still got to go to the Etihad and welcome a lot of the teams back to St James's Park, but you'd fancy them to beat anybody. And I think it's up for debate whether they're in a title race. I think it probably splits opinion. I think the more optimistic fans will say, yeah, they can claw back 9 points. Maybe me and you will look at each other thinking it's maybe a little hurdle too big, but they're certainly the runner for the top 4. And I think that 5-point gap, especially given how the teams around them are stuttering, it's theirs to lose, really.
Let them go under the radar for the title race. If people want to write them off, just let Eddie Howe and Newcastle United go about their day job quietly, and let's see what happens at the end of the season. But it is maybe, as things stand, a step too far. They had their own chances last night to win the game. There were very few clear-cut chances, but Joe Linton had an effort at the end of the first half. Should he have scored that header?
Yeah, no doubt about it. That was a big chance, and I think in games of that nature where it can literally hang on one chance, you've got to be finishing it. But yeah, look, it's hindsight, isn't it?
Hindsight, it's bad heading.
Yeah, that's well. Yeah, he should have finished it, and especially in a game of that magnitude where you don't have too many chances. Wilson looked a bit off the pace. Wood didn't offer too much. I think it was 6 touches when he came on. Those are the chances you've really got to be taking, isn't it?
Well, this is probably the one negative aspect to come out of last night is the depth of the bench, the depth of the squad. Because when Chris Wood comes off the bench for Callum Wilson, who had a quiet game, you're not expecting a goal. Then you look at Jacob Murphy, who there's no doubt in these players' commitment and effort to the cause. But do Newcastle need just a bit more to secure a top 4 spot to keep building? Because the bench is maybe Anson Maxman aside. Obviously, Isak's not on it, but when he's back, him aside, is there really enough to push Newcastle forward?
I'm not sure. I think last night Wood and Murphy coming on before Maxi was maybe Howe trying to shore up the game rather than go and try and win it. I don't think anybody was sort of very excited about the chances of them going to get a winner when those two replaced Wilson and Miggy. But a lot of it, and I know I keep going back to it, a lot of it rests on Isak. There's got to be something up with Maxi for him to only get 3 minutes, whether it was just the game of that nature and the fact Newcastle were under the cosh. But I mean, this is a player that was absolutely tearing Manchester City's defence apart only 3 months ago. Now, I mean, I'm sure he'll get his opportunity Saturday when Howe rotates in the Cup, but you just can't find a way into this team at the minute.
Do you need that discipline against an All-Star? Because that was the time of the game when, yes, going forward, you could use someone like Maxi because he's got the legs and he can run at the defences, but also at the same time, Arsenal are throwing absolutely everything at you, so you need a bit of discipline. And, we know he's not that defensively minded. So maybe that had an element into why Murphy comes off the bench first, because in theory, he's a little bit better when it comes to, helping out the fullbacks.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, look, there's no doubt Murphy offers a lot more defensively than Maxi would on the other flank. But, I mean, you've touched on it. Howe's come out in his post-match press and saying, I'm disappointed it wasn't more. Well, really, if that is really what you think, surely Maxi should have been on that pitch a lot earlier, because I think...
Then you have to rely... And then I get it, it's a gamble, you're rolling the dice, and that's what a gamble is, but you have to rely on Maxi delivering the goods. He goes up the pitch, he loses the ball, Arsenal attack, Dan Burns exposed where he was in the first 10, 20 minutes.
But would you trust Maxi to deliver the business or Jacob Murphy?
Well, that's why Eddie Howe's paid the big bucks. And we were talking, weren't we, off camera about there was a moment when Jacob Murphy, he goes forward, then he kind of goes sideways. He loses the ball, and Arsenal take it up to Newcastle's left-hand side, and Murphy follows it. He tries to win it back, but then that left Trippier exposed over on the right-hand side, and that's the sort of discipline that you need when you are facing these top sides. It's not pretty, but that's what you need, and Miggy provides that. Joe Linton, when he's out on the left, he provides it. You then look around, it's difficult though, isn't it? Because
if I'm honest, I feel like we've gone off topic because really the question was, do they need more off the bench? And the answer is they do, because I think even whether it's Maxi or Murphy or Wood, you do need more, and Isak needs to come back and quickly. They need more depth, not just in attack, but I think they need, as a priority, they need another midfielder in this window.
Defensive, creative.
I'd like to see defensive. I'd like to see someone who can hold, which allows Bruno to go forward, which allows obviously Willock in that 10 role. But I just think you look at that depth in the midfield and I just don't think they've got enough. So, in short, they need more off the bench, and they need it this month probably.
Roger saying he would like a defensive midfielder to allow Bruno to get more attacking while making the defence even more solid. That, with a fit Isak, would give Newcastle a titanium spine. It's interesting because we've mentioned there the character within the dressing room. Anyhow, was asked about it earlier in the week about how important the character is within the squad, and any rivals will have to fit into that. And there's no doubting the effort and the character of the likes of Murphy, of the likes of Wood. But at what point do you have to say that's all good, but we need better players? Like, where does the balance come? Because it's a difficult balance to get.
It is, and I think in a year's time we probably won't be having this conversation, because I think in a couple of transfer windows' time you'll have a squad where pretty much everyone's on the same level. I don't think the squad's anywhere near that at the minute. I think you've probably got 12 or 13 standouts, and then the rest are sort of, settling for places on the bench and maybe worrying about the long-term future. So Chris Wood, he's trying to fit into the system, but I just think, when you're looking for a winner in a game like that last night, you were never really confident that he's going to supply the goods.
Unfortunately. And John Askew makes an excellent point. Fantastic to have a great defence, which we will discuss in a moment. But he says, however, we haven't scored for 2.5 games. Should this be addressed in the window? Well, regular listeners to the podcast will know I definitely think it should be. But that, Aaron, is certainly easier said than done.
Yeah, and look, I can't remember which pundit it was last night on Sky, but they made a very good point, and that is that pretty much the entire Premier League is going to be looking for a new forward. Manchester United are going to want one. Chelsea will certainly want one. Arsenal are looking for a Gabby Jesus, which means, Newcastle are already fighting a battle to lure, talented players in that position in the Premier League. A lot of it rests on Isak. If Isak had been fully fit this season, I know it's a big if, but would we really be sat here thinking they need another one? I'm not so sure we would. But
I think I probably would, I think I probably would.
But let's just say, look, this is all hypothetical, and Isak had either overcome his injury a lot earlier, or he'd never got injured in the first place. He's got 7 or 8 goals in this team. He's keeping Wilson in and out the team. All of a sudden, you're bringing Callum Wilson off the bench instead of Chris Wood. Wood's at third place. A lot of it.
I don't think it would become a priority. I don't think it would have been a priority, but I still think
they
were short in that area because just the way they play, it doesn't suit Chris Wood, unfortunately. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see what they do in January. We discussed previously. Do they roll the dice because of the position they're in, or do they stick to the plan and build gradually? But Liverpool out of form, Chelsea out of form. They might not get a better chance than this.
No European football to hold them back. They are in quite a privileged position to have a fantastic advantage going into 2023. I think the one thing Eddie Howe's been, pretty. Yes, he hasn't given too much away transfer-wise, but one thing he's been pretty solid on recently is the fact that he doesn't want to spend for the sake of it. He doesn't want to pay over the odds. It's the same as in the summer, and I think the message for this month is it'll be gradual. Buy where they need to buy rather than, feeling like they need to go out and do, 100 million's worth of business. So Look, we'll know in 4 weeks' time, but I think if you could say to me now, Newcastle are only going to sign 2 players this month, I would want a midfielder, then a backup right back, and then third it would be a striker.
Nah, get out, man. Get out. Third. It has to be.
Does that have to be first?
Yeah,
Priority number
I
one.
think it does.
So you look at that midfield of...
Because Isak's going to take, right? So Isak's been out for goodness knows how long now. Even when he's fit, he's not going to be match fit. So that's going to take at least a few weeks for him to get back to scratch. We saw it with John Shelby, how many weeks it took for him to get to a level of where he could actually play, and then unfortunately he's gone and got injured. So Isak's going to have to go through the same thing where he builds up that match fitness. Chris Wood, he's trying, great man to have in the squad. It's just not working for him. Callum Wilson doesn't look quite right just yet. Even if he just has an off day, Newcastle are lacking goals. They're lacking a forward man.
So if it's priority number one, what type of striker do they go and buy? Do they go and buy?
I think they're going to try and buy someone that
better than Isak and Wilson on their level.
If that person is out there, I mean, you always want to buy better, don't you? I mean, again, that's easier said than done. But I would try and get someone, if it was my decision, in the same mould as Wilson, who can just fit straight into the way they play, can run the channels, can chase the ball down, chase the defenders down. Because, that's unfortunately what Chris Wood can't do.
Yeah, and look, I don't disagree that they probably do need more attack, but I just think in this window, with not too much money that they're willing to spend, I think you've just got to focus, prioritise other parts of the squad. That midfield looks so short now. Shelby is injured. I think Joelinton, Willock and Longstaff looked absolutely shattered last night. They've still got 5 games this month. I just think a midfielder needs to be the priority number one.
Let us know in the comments what you think the priority should be this January. We've got John Steele here saying, we're talking strikers, why not give QL or Stevenson a go? They could save us millions and maybe better than we think. Well, we know QL is set to go out on loan somewhere. We don't quite know where yet, but there seems to be plenty of interest. He was in the stands last night watching the game, and Stevenson obviously performing really well in the youth setup. But it's a big ask to throw a youngster into the mix, isn't it?
It's a big jump, especially in a top 4 race, especially when they haven't had too much first team experience. And look, I've got no doubt that they're both fantastic players, especially Grant Kowal, but are they the answer at this stage of the season? I'm not too sure.
Shall we talk about Newcastle's defence, somewhere where they, at least first team wise, don't need to improve, because I'm not sure how you can get any better. I'm actually maybe going to have to set up another fan club. We know we've got the Miguel Almiron fan club. I think it's time for a Sven Botman fan club, isn't it?
I think Gibbo would be a lot more open to Sven Botman than a Miguel Almiron fan club. I mean, I think you'd have a mailing list very long for applications for that one.
Fantastic again.
He just makes it look so easy. I mean, every game, and I think he went under the radar last night. I think, you haven't really heard his name being mentioned, but I thought he was fantastic again. Kept Eddie Nketiah really quiet. I mean, he's already been talked about as sort of, the Woodgate of he's the best centre-back fans have ever seen, and he's played 18 games. I think that just sums it up. He looks a different class already, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll keep banging the drum. For 33 million, he looks an absolute bargain.
Absolutely. And it's a bit like Bruno, you're questioning where these so-called top 6 sides were in their scouts when these guys are not only available, but available for what, 30, 40 million quid? I mean,
pennies for a team like City or Chelsea, isn't it?
I've got the stats here somewhere for Sven Botman, because it is quite remarkable. 18 games, of which Newcastle have won 12, lost none, kept 12 clean sheets. I mean, absolutely amazing. That's the strength and the ability. Sven Botman, Fabian Schär was performing well before he came in. He's gone up a level. Dan Burn looks very comfortable at left back, which is not a sentence I thought I'd hear myself say. Kieran Trippier. And then Nick Pope, as we said on yesterday's episode, I still maintain that he's probably the bargain of the new Newcastle United era. And again, we were speaking about often he doesn't have to do too much because Newcastle are quite solid at the back. But when he's called upon in those brief moments, he's there, and he did it last night with a fantastic save from the Arsenal striker. How am I going to pronounce it? Because we know my pronunciation is shocking. Go on. Nketiah. There we go. See, I should have believed it myself. I mean, it was a fantastic save because Botman's gone to the ground to try and stop him. He gets the ball, gets a shot off through Botman, and Pope must see that pretty late. And he's only 7 or 8 yards out from goal as well.
Yeah, there was a fantastic save in the first half as well from Saka. Whenever he's called upon, he's been fantastic. It's coming out for crosses, the way he just sort of marauds around that box and dominates it. Absolutely fantastic. And I mean, it just seems like not only Pope, but that back four in front of him. I've never seen a more confident Newcastle back line. And I think it's hard to believe that three of them joined the club. Sorry, four of the back five joined the club this last year. I mean, it looked like they've been playing together for absolute years. And while we're on the topic of the defence, I just want to give a big shout out to Jamal Lascelles, who continues to play a part on that touchline. I mean, 2 yellow cards and he hasn't been on the pitch. That is leadership, if you ask me.
Fantastic. But you know what? He was right, though. I mean, the guy walked 4 or 5 yards ahead of where the ball needed to be thrown in from. Fantastic, the fact that he's got 2 yellow cards without even playing. And it just goes to show as well the good character of him, because he hasn't played, has he? He'll probably play, you would imagine, maybe against Sheffield Wednesday. But when he comes in, he does a job. He hasn't kicked up a fuss. He's accepted his fate, and he's just still being that captain off the pitch.
And I mean, if I'm completely honest, I think his game is, even though he hasn't been playing, has actually improved in recent weeks. Whenever he's came in, you sort of used to have this thing with Lascelles, especially in the Bruce, that he's prone to a mistake, or he's maybe the weak link at times. You don't really get that anymore. And I go back to that performance at Anfield where, yes, they got beat, but he had a really, really solid performance and very, very good leader to have around the dressing room. And I think a very, very good decision to keep him at the club, even though he's not on the pitch.
An interesting point here, though, from John Askew. He says the only problem with the defence is the ageing process. Botman is the only young one, and this will need to be addressed going forward. So Trippier's 32, I think Share's 31, 30, Dan Burns 30. So John's got a point there, but at the same time, football is a totally different game to what it once was. These players can go on for a long time, and even defence where you need to be a bit quicker than other areas in the pitch. If you're fit, you can go on till 33, 34 to a decent stand. I mean, I don't see Kieran Trippier giving up that right back spot the next couple of seasons.
No, 100%. And I mean, yes, John makes a fantastic point about their age, but I mean, remember 12 months ago, who was the back four? It was probably Manquillo, Lascelles, Cher, and
Richie
at left back. I mean, a lot of things can change in a year, as we've seen on Newcastle. So it wouldn't surprise me if in a couple of transfers windows' time they're maybe trying to bring in a younger centre back that can maybe partner Botman long term. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future that left back position is maybe solved as well. But I mean, these are dilemmas to worry about in the future. I wouldn't see any need to change anything at the back right now.
Craig saying we've had some top keepers, but Nick Pope is undoubtedly the best. His presence is unmatched. So better than Shea Given,
it's a bold call,
better than Xhaka, better than Pav, better than Tim Krul.
It's a bold call by Craig. I think jury's still out on that one. I think maybe if he can do it over a 5 or 6 year period, but I don't think anyone he's getting in my Newcastle 11 above Shea Given at the minute.
5 or 6 year period is the market.
Yeah, I think rather than 5 or 6 months, we'll go 5 or 6 years.
Well, that's the standard Shea Given is set, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's well on his way though, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think he is well on his way, and any sort of doubts that fans may have had about throwing Pope in over Dubravka in the summer have been proved absolutely spot on. And one thing I would just want to say on Dubravka is I thought it was quite telling last night that he was straight on the bench. I didn't expect him to be thrown back in from the outset, and I think it leaves Karius's position in a very, very precarious position at the moment. And I think Carl Darlow must probably be sitting there. If Caldwell was fully fit yesterday, you're sitting there thinking, hang on, that's maybe a bit bang out of order. So very, as we touched on yesterday morning, very interested to see what to do with those 4 keepers this month.
100%. It's going to be an interesting month across the board, and we'll bring you live coverage of the transfer window every day on a dedicated live blog over on chroniclelive.co.uk. Now, you guys watching the game last night, listening to the game, following it through a live blog, however you watched it or caught up on it, would have seen Mikel Arteta going a little bit crazy on the touchline. He wasn't very happy in the dying stages of the game. He felt Arsenal should have had a penalty for a handball. Jacob Murphy would have been sweating a little bit as the decision went to VAR. The VAR said no penalty. For me, that one was never a penalty. Where else can Jacob Murphy's arm go? The other one, Dan Burn, I have to say, I think it was probably a penalty.
I think if that's the other way around and Gabriel's clinging on to Dan Burn's shirt like that, I think Newcastle United fans are probably, a lot more disappointed than they would be today. I think that was an absolute stonewall, and I'm very, very surprised VAR didn't overturn it. And I think, if the shoe had been on the other foot, Arteta would have been absolutely furious to have conceded a 95th minute penalty with someone's arm in a position like that. So I think the referee, I can't believe we've got this far in the podcast. I haven't mentioned.
Do you know what? I'm sick of talking
referee.
about how bad the referees have been, because we had one. Was it against Leeds? We had one was bad. Right? We seem to go through stages of having bad referees every so often, and they're not just bad; they're really bad. What he was doing yesterday, he set the precedent, and the commentators. I can't remember who was the commentator, but he was exactly right. By giving, I think Bruno got one, didn't he? And there was someone else that got one. Then he stopped giving out yellow cards for a bit. It was all just an absolute mess.
He lost control of that game in the first half. I think between the 27th minute and the 42nd minute, he dished out 5 yellow cards. 5 and 15 minutes, you've lost the game. I think he really needed that half-time whistle to go from his own lips. But yeah, I thought second half he sort of tried to calm it down and then lost it again after he booked Jolinton. But I thought that Burn on Gabriel decision was very, very harsh for Arsenal.
Shall we hear from Mikel Arteta, because he wasn't very happy?
I'm really proud the way we played, the way we dominated the game, the approach that we had from the beginning. We lacked that spark in the final third to find the opening, to find the right moment, an extra pass and a little bit the finishing quality, but we had a lot of situations in and around the box to do better. And then, there were 2 scandalous penalties.
You felt particularly the last one?
Both of them. It's not particular. It's a penalty or not a penalty, and it's both penalties.
Interesting. Like I say, Dan Burn one for me is a penalty. I think he's got away with one there. The handball, definitely not. But Arteta, as we've kind of mentioned already in this episode, he seems to not be handling sitting at the Premier League too well.
Yeah, it's interesting because Arsenal have looked so, calm and composed on the pitch this season, and I thought it was quite out of character for Arteta to do that yesterday, especially how wound up he was getting at, the apparent time wasting and Jason Tyndall, constantly being out of the technical area, and then, the way that he exploded with that late penalty decision. I thought Eddie Howe was actually quite right to go over and say, hang on,
it's not often you see Eddie break character like that.
You really don't see Howe lose his rag on the touchline at all. He's, even when Newcastle score, he's not that animated for too long. When decisions go against him, it's usually Tyndall doing the barking at the referee. So it was out of character. But I think, as we touched on earlier in the pod, if Arsenal want to be at the top and keep this 9-point gap, they're going to have to manage their emotions. And to be fair, I thought the players did quite well from Arsenal. They kept their cool, but Arteta, and I thought his comments after were quite out of order, really scandalous. We've seen worse not giving the Premier League. Look, it was a mistake from the referee. It didn't cost them, a defeat. So yeah, I thought it was odd behaviour from him at full time and during the game.
I suppose, Newcastle have got a history of, especially with one manager at the top of the table, not keeping his emotions in check. So maybe it's to be expected when you're there for the first time and looking likely to win the Premier League. there was another Bruno moment down in front of the away end when he wins the tackle and he's screaming. I mean, we saw it a few weeks ago. You just love to see it, though.
Yeah, fantastic character and exactly what you want to see, and especially in moments like that when the game's tight and the fans needed a lift in that corner. You saw the last 10 minutes of the game, Newcastle fans, every time the Sky cameras panned to them and they had their tops off, they were thinking, you know what, we've got a corner here, we can go and win it. So a big part of that is down to Bruno and his antics. And again, I thought he had quite a quiet game on the pitch, but he offers, sort of quiet leadership role, doesn't he, that he's sort of grown into, I feel.
We saw at times, them trying to spray the ball like they have done against lesser teams, and they've got so many great passes of the ball across the pitch, really, Trippier, Bruno, and it's going to be interesting to see how Newcastle's style develops over the rest of the season, because there may come a point when there have to be major changes in the way they do play because teams find them out, and I think that's what was one of the pluses of last night, as people have mentioned in the comments, just how easy Eddie Howe adapted his team to face Arsenal, and that's probably something he's going to have to do more and more as the years go on. Yeah,
look, he's done it all season against all types of opponents. He's making sure Newcastle find a way to win or grind out results. The interesting thing comes, as you've just touched on, is when teams actually start finding them out, when they learn how to stop that Bruno Miggy interlink, when they learn out, how to stop Trippier bombing down that right, or the Wilson getting space. But look, he's adapted to everything that's came to him so far, and I've got no doubt how we'll find another way when the time comes.
To the transfer window, then we spoke yesterday about some names being linked, and it seems like the one that is definitely on the radar is the right back from Real Valladolid. Youngster, 19-year-old. Remind me of his name.
Ivan Fresneda.
There we go. Never in doubt. It's interesting because the talk seems to be that he would be loaned back to his side, but Newcastle could probably do with him on the books, couldn't they?
Yeah, look, as I've just said earlier, it's priority number 2 for me is making sure they're getting a backup right back this season, especially with Kraft being out for so long. There's talk of a £10 million deal initially, potentially rising to 30. Clearly a very, very talented right back playing in Spanish's top tier. Talk that Dortmund and Juventus or other clubs sniffing around them. So I'm sure there'll be competition for him, but I would love to see Newcastle get in a player of that, quality, and, he fits that age bracket, 18. He can learn from Kieran Trippier, while also offering a bit of depth in that position. So hopefully, it's one that can get over the line.
Eddie Howe was asked about the transfer window last night on Sky, and he said something along the lines of like, there's nothing imminent, there's no kind of plans to improve the squad. Now he's unlikely to come out and say, yes, we want X, Y, and Z. Is it a bit of kind of just reading between the lines, you think? Of course, they will go out if the right player's there to improve the squad. They will be looking, they will have had talks over the last few months. And you expect something to happen this month?
Yeah, I think one or two in. I think what you get with Howe when he's asked these questions, and as he always likes to say, he responds with, "I'm going to give you a boring answer," and you know what's coming, and that is pretty much a denial most of the time. But it doesn't look like anything's imminent at the minute from the incoming side. But I think as the window goes on, a lot of it will depend on whether they get through these cup games, especially the Carabao. But I think one or two before the end of January is probably most likely.
Going to be an interesting month, as I mentioned. Do head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep it with all the latest Newcastle United news through our dedicated Transfer Live blog, and we'll bring you all the build up to the game against Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup, and then of course looking ahead to that quarter final against Leicester City on Tuesday. Remember to bring your scarves to St James's Park if you are indeed going to the ground to watch the game. We'll have live coverage of Sheffield or the game against Sheffield Wednesday on Saturday through our live blog. The press conference on Friday as well.
Yeah,
indeed. Always good to hear what Eddie has to say before the game. Just an exciting time to follow Newcastle United. Do head over to the website. Do hit the subscribe button and enjoy the rest of your week.